60 million. That is the number of people in the United States who are currently sitting in the kill zone of the greatest financial demolition in recorded history. They are not the poor. They are not the unemployed. They are the people who did everything right. They are the people with 401ks. They are the people with pensions. They are the people who own homes in the suburbs and believe that if they just work hard and save money, the system will protect them. But the system isn't going to protect them. The system is being re-engineered to consume them. While you were watching the stock market hit all-time highs while you were distracted by the latest political circus, a specific mathematical threshold was crossed in the global bond markets that has only been crossed 3 times in the last 500 years. This threshold is the point of no return. It signals that the era of wealth accumulation is over, and the era of wealth confiscation has begun. By the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly why 2027 is the terminal date for the American middle class as we know it. You will see the 4-stage pattern that guarantees this outcome. And you will understand why the smart money, the billionaires, the central banks, the insiders, are quietly moving their assets out of the very investment vehicles that you are currently counting on for your retirement. They aren't telling you this on the news. They can't. If they told you the truth, the panic would destroy the system overnight. They need you to stay calm. They need you to keep buying. They need you to stay in the burning building so they can sneak out the back door. This isn't a prediction. This is a warning. The data is screaming. The trap is set. And 60 million Americans are about to walk right into it. Most people believe that economic collapses are accidents. They think they are random events caused by bad luck or incompetence. They imagine a stock market crash is like a thunderstorm. It just happens, and then the sun comes out again. That is a lie. Economic collapses are not accidents. They are mechanics. They are the mathematical result of specific inputs producing specific outputs. For the last 80 years, the American economy has operated on a unique privilege. We could print money without consequences. We could run massive debts without bankruptcy. We could export our inflation to the rest of the world, and in exchange, the world sent us cheap goods and cheap credit. It was the greatest deal in history. It built the suburbs. It built the middle class. It allowed 60 million people to feel wealthy. But that deal had an expiration date, and that date is approaching faster than anyone is willing to admit. There is a cycle to these things. A 4-stage cycle that has destroyed every single reserve currency empire in history. It starts building welfare states it can't fund. It starts printing money to cover the gap. This was America from 1971 to 2008. Stage 3 is the harvest. This is the most dangerous phase. It looks like prosperity, but it is actually rot. The stock market goes up, not because the economy is growing, but because the currency is being debased. The rich get richer, the poor get poorer, and the middle class gets hollowed out by inflation. The debt becomes unpayable. The math breaks. That number's so big it sounds meaningless. But here's the number that matters. Interest. We are now spending more money just to pay the interest on our debt than we spend on our entire national defense. We are spending more on interest than we spend on Medicare. This creates a doom loop. To pay the interest, the government has to borrow more money. To borrow more money, they have to sell more bonds. But because they are selling so many bonds, the value of those bonds drops. And the smart money, the people who run BlackRock, the people who run the central banks, the people who actually own the system, they know this. They have seen the spreadsheets. They know the doom loop has triggered. So what are they doing? They are preparing to sacrifice you. They are preparing to sacrifice the 60 million Americans who hold the bag. Think about your pension fund. Think about your 401k. What is inside it? It is filled with U.S. Treasury bonds. It is filled with stocks that depend on cheap debt. It is filled with assets that only have value if the current system continues. But the insiders are quietly moving their money elsewhere. They are buying farmland. They are buying gold. They are buying energy infrastructure. They are buying the real things that survive a currency collapse. Meanwhile, they are telling you to buy the dip. They're telling you that inflation is cooling. The Spanish middle class in the 1600s didn't see it coming. The Dutch merchants in the 1700s didn't see it coming. The British savers in the 1900s didn't see it coming. They all believed their empire was eternal. They all believed their currency was as good as gold. They all believed the government would save them. And they all lost everything. In the next section of this video, I'm going to take you back in time. I'm going to show you the rule of three. I'm going to show you the undeniable historical proof that what is happening right now in the US bond market is an exact replay of the collapse of the British pound in the 1930s. You will see the same headlines, you will hear the same political lies, and you will see the same tragic outcome for the people who didn't prepare. This isn't a history lesson, it is a map of your future. And once you see the pattern, you will never look at your bank account the same way again. The countdown to 2027 has started. The mechanism is in motion. Let me show you the proof. To understand the future, you have to stop listening to the news and start looking at the autopsy reports of dead empires. Most people think American exceptionalism means the rules don't apply to us. They think because we have iPhones and aircraft carriers, basic arithmetic doesn't matter. But gravity applies to everyone, and economic gravity is undefeated. The rule of three is the historical observation that in the modern financial era, the exact same sequence of middle-class destruction has happened 3 times. Each time, the public was told everything was fine. Each time, the experts said, it's different this time. And each time, the saver, the person who followed the rules, was the primary victim. Let's look at the first case, the Spanish Empire in the 1600s. Spain was the United States of its day. It was the global superpower. It controlled the reserve currency, the Spanish real. It had massive wealth flowing in from the Americas. It seemed invincible. But the Spanish government had a problem. They spent more than they made. They fought endless wars. They built massive bureaucracies. And to pay for it all, they relied on the constant inflow of gold and silver. When the costs became too high, they started debasing the currency. They literally mixed copper into the silver coins to make them stretch further. This was the 17th century version of quantitative easing. For the Spanish elite, this didn't matter. They owned land, they owned estates, they had hard assets. But for the growing Spanish merchant class, the middle class of that era, it was fatal. They held their savings in currency. They held government bonds called juros. When the inflation hit, the price of bread skyrocketed. The cost of living exploded. But the value of their savings stayed flat. In a span of 40 years, the Spanish middle class was wiped out. They didn't lose their money to a thief. They lost it to their own government's inflation. The wealth didn't disappear. It was transferred from the people holding the currency to the people holding the debt. Case study 2, the Dutch Republic in the 1700s. A century later, the capital moved to Amsterdam. The Dutch guilder became the world's reserve currency. The Dutch invented the stock market. They invented the central bank. They were the most sophisticated financial power on earth. But by 1780, they had fallen into the same trap. They stopped making things and started just moving money around. The economy became financialized. The Dutch middle class put all their money into the safe investment of the day, government bonds and shares in the Dutch East India Company. It was the 18th century equivalent of the S&P 500. They lived off the dividends. They thought it was permanent. But the Dutch government was drowning in debt. To keep the system going, they had to keep interest rates artificially low. This created a massive asset bubble. When the bubble finally burst in the 1790s, triggered by a geopolitical crisis, the collapse wasn't a slow decline. It was instantaneous. The Dutch East India Company went to zero. The government bonds became worthless. The rentier class, the retirees, the widows, the prudent savers, were destitute overnight. The rich, the smart money, they had already moved their capital to London. They saw the debt levels. They saw the math. They exited the guilder before the crash. Case study 3, the British Empire in the 1900s. This is the most terrifying example because it is the closest to where we are right now. In 1914, the British pound was the king of currencies. A bond issued by the British government called a consul was considered the safest asset in the universe. It was the risk-free rate. Generations of British families put their life savings into these bonds. It was their 401k. It was their set it and forget it. But then came the debt. World War I and World War II bankrupt the nation. The debt to GDP ratio exploded to over 200%. The British government faced the choice: default on the debt and admit bankruptcy, or inflate the debt away and rob the savers. They chose inflation. They chose financial repression. Between 1914 and 1950, the purchasing power of the British pound collapsed. The nominal value of the bond stayed the same. You got your $100 back, but that $100 bought 60% less than it did when you invested it. It was a slow-motion confiscation of wealth. The 60 million people living in the British Empire who trusted the safe four assets were sheared like sheep. The standard of living plummeted. The empire dissolved. And just like before, the insiders, the Rothschilds, the major trading houses, they didn't hold pounds. They held gold. They held shares in American steel companies. They moved their wealth to the new rising power. Now, look at the United States in 2026. We have the same debt profile as Spain. We have the same financialized economy as the Dutch. We have the same fading reserve currency status as the British. We are checking every single box on the empire collapse checklist. The 60 million Americans I'm talking about, the ones holding 401ks filled with bonds and overvalued tech stocks, are the modern version of the Spanish merchant, the Dutch rentier, and the British bondholder. They are the bag holders. They are holding the paper promises of a bankrupt empire, believing that this time is different. It is not different. The mechanics are identical. The government has $36 trillion in debt. They cannot pay it back in real terms. They must inflate it away. That means every dollar you hold, every bond you own is designed to lose value. It is not a bug. It is a feature of the system. The smart money knows this. That is why they are behaving strangely. Have you noticed that the billionaires are selling stock? Have you noticed that central banks are buying gold at record rates? Have you noticed that BlackRock is buying single-family homes? They are trading paper for things. They are trading promises for reality. They are getting out of the blast radius before the detonation. And you? You're being told to put more money into the 401k. You are being told that 7% annual returns are guaranteed. You are being told to stay asleep. In the next part of this video, I'm going to show you the trigger. We have talked about the history. We have talked about the debt. But there is a specific event, a specific catalyst, that is developing in the shadows right now that will turn this slow decline into a sudden collapse. It involves the Japanese yen, the US Treasury market, and a $20 trillion wall of liquidity that is about to break the dam. When you see the mechanics of this trigger, you will understand why 2027 isn't just a guess. It is the mathematical expiration date of the current financial order. To find the trigger that ends the American financial empire, you don't look at the Federal Reserve in Washington. You don't look at Wall Street in New York. You look at a boring, gray building in Tokyo, the Bank of Japan. This is the butterfly effect scenario that keeps every hedge fund manager awake at night. A decision made by a bureaucrat in Japan is about to wipe out the retirement account of a school teacher in Ohio, and she won't even know why it happened. For the last 30 years, Japan has kept its interest rates at zero. They printed money and practically gave it away. This created a phenomenon called the yen carry trade. Here is how it works, and you need to understand this because it is the engine of the fake prosperity you see around you. Big institutional investors borrow billions of yen in Japan for free, 0% interest. They take that free money, convert it into US dollars, and buy US assets. They buy US treasury bonds. They buy US tech stocks. They buy US corporate debt. It is free leverage. It is a money printing machine for Wall Street. This carry trade has injected roughly $20 trillion of artificial liquidity into the U.S. markets over the last 3 decades. It is the reason stocks keep going up, even when the economy is slowing. It is the reason bond yields stayed low, even when inflation was high. We imported Japan's savings to fund our spending. But now the machine is breaking. Japan has a problem. Because they printed so much money to fund the carry trade, their own currency, the yen, is collapsing. It has lost massive value against the dollar. This causes inflation in Japan. The Japanese public is angry. The cost of living is skyrocketing. So the Bank of Japan has no choice. They are being forced to raise interest rates. They are being forced to stop the printing press. This is the trigger. When Japanese rates rise, the carry trade doesn't just stop. It reverses. And it reverses violently. Imagine you borrowed $10 billion at 0% to buy Apple stock. Suddenly, your loan now costs 2% or 3%. And the yen is getting stronger, so paying back the loan costs even more. What do? You panic. You sell the Apple stock. You sell the US Treasury bonds. You convert your dollars back to yen to pay off the loan before you go bankrupt. Now, imagine every major hedge fund and bank in the world doing this at the exact same time. It is a margin call from hell. Trillions of dollars of US assets will be dumped on the market instantly. Not because the US economy is bad, but because the free money spigot in Tokyo just got turned off. And here is where the date 2027 becomes critical. While this massive wave of selling is hitting the market, the US corporate world is facing a maturity wall. During the COVID era, of 2020 and 2021, U.S. companies borrowed trillions of dollars at rock bottom interest rates. They locked in 2% and 3% rates for 5 years. Do the math. 2021 plus 5 years is 2026. 2022 plus 5 years is 2027. In the next 24 months, trillions of dollars of corporate debt is coming due. These companies, the ones in your S&P 500 index fund, the ones in your pension plan, have to refinance that debt. But they can't refinance at 2%. They have to refinance at 6%, 7%, or 8%. For thousands of zombie companies that only survive because of cheap debt, this is a death sentence. Their interest payments will triple overnight. Their profits will vanish. They will start laying off workers. They will start defaulting on their bonds. So now you have the perfect storm converging on the year 2027. Factor 1, the Japanese carry trade unwinds, dumping U.S. treasuries and stocks. Factor 2, the corporate debt wall hits, causing a wave of bankruptcies and defaults. Factor 3, the U.S. government deficit continues to explode, requiring the Treasury to sell more bonds into a market where nobody is buying. This creates a liquidity vacuum. In a normal market, when someone sells, someone else buys. But in a liquidity vacuum, there are no buyers. Everyone is rushing for the exit, but the door is welded shut. This is when you see the air pocket crashes. The Dow Jones drops 3,000 points in a day. Treasury yields spike to 10%. The financial plumbing seizes up. And who is holding the bag? Who owns the corporate bonds that are defaulting? Who owns the stocks that are crashing? Who owns the treasuries that are losing value? The 60 million Americans. Your pension fund owns them. Your insurance company owns them. Your 401k target date fund owns them. The smart money doesn't own this stuff anymore. They read the macro reports. They saw the Japanese pivot coming. They saw the debt maturity wall. They have been selling to you for the last 2 years. When you bought the dip in 2024 and 2025, who do you think sold it to you? The institutions, the insiders. They shifted the risk from their balance sheets to yours. This is the mechanics of the great wealth transfer. It isn't a robbery at gunpoint. It is a robbery by counterparty. They sold you a ticking time bomb, and they convinced you it was a nest egg. But there is one final piece to this puzzle, the most sinister piece. The government knows this crash is coming. They have models that are far more sophisticated than anything I can tell you. They know the date, they know the trigger, and they are preparing a solution. You've probably heard rumors of it. Maybe you heard the term CBDC or FedNow. They aren't building these systems for convenience. They are building them for capture. When the crash of 2027 hits, when the 401ks are vaporized and the banks are freezing withdrawals, the government will not say, sorry, we messed up. They will say, we have a solution to save you. They will offer to guarantee your deposits. They will offer emergency stimulus to rebuild your accounts. But that money will come with conditions. It will come on a programmable digital ledger. It will come with the end of financial privacy. They will use the crisis they created to herd 60 million desperate Americans into a new financial system where you do not actually own your money. You're just granted permission to use it. This is the ultimate destination of stage 4. It isn't just a market crash. It is a regime change. It is the transition from a system of ownership to a system of permission. The 60 million people who lose everything will be the first ones to sign up for this new system because they will be hungry. They will be scared. They will have no choice. But you still have a choice. We are not in 2027 yet. We are in the final countdown. The Japanese rates are rising, but the dam hasn't broken. The corporate debt is maturing, but the defaults haven't started en masse. You have a window of time, a window to step out of the kill zone. In the final part of this video, I'm going to tell you exactly what that looks like. I'm not selling you a course. I'm not giving you a stock tip. I am going to give you the survival framework. I am going to tell you the 3 assets that historically survive a sovereign debt collapse. I'm going to tell you how to firewall your wealth from the banking system. And I am going to tell you the one thing you must possess that is more valuable than gold when the credit markets freeze. The storm is on the horizon. The thunder is already rolling in Tokyo. Do not wait until the rain starts to build your shelter. Panic is not a strategy. Hope is not a hedge. And waiting for the government to save you is not a plan. It is a suicide pact. We have covered the history. We have covered the mathematics of the debt spiral. We have covered the trigger in Japan. You now possess the information that 99% of the population will only learn when it is flashing across their screens in breaking news read. But information without action is worthless. Knowing the tsunami is coming doesn't save you if you don't climb to higher ground. So how do you survive 2027? How do you ensure that when the 60 million Americans are losing everything, you are one of the few who remain standing? You have to completely change your mindset. For the last 40 years, investing was about return on investment. It was about chasing yield. It was about greed. For the next 5 years, investing is about return of investment. It is about survival. It is about keeping what you have. The survival framework is built on 3 pillars. These are the 3 assets that have historically survived every currency collapse from Rome to Weimar Germany. The insiders are buying them right now. You should be looking at them too. The first asset is God's money. Gold and silver. I know, you've heard it 1,000 times, but you need to understand why. Gold is not an investment. It is not a way to get rich. Gold is insurance. It is the only financial asset in the world that is not someone else's liability. If you own a bond, that is the government's liability. If you own a stock, that is a company's liability. If you have cash in the bank, that is the bank's liability. If they go broke, you lose. But if you hold a physical gold coin in your hand, you don't need anyone to keep a promise for that coin to have value. It simply is. It is the ultimate firewall against the counterparty risk that is rotting the system. When the Japanese bond market implodes and the US Treasury market freezes, gold will be the only thing that bids. It is your bridge across the chaotic water of stage 4. The second asset class is essential reality. When the financial economy collapses, the real economy takes over. You cannot eat a stock certificate. You cannot heat your home with a bond. The insiders are moving capital into things that human beings need to survive, regardless of what the currency is doing. Productive farmland, energy royalties, water rights, commodities. Look at Bill Gates. Look at the major family offices. They are becoming landlords of the earth. They know that in a depression, people will stop buying new iPhones, but they will not stop buying food. They will not stop turning on the lights. You don't need to buy 1,000 acres in Montana to do this. You can invest in commodities indices. You can own energy producers. You can stock your own pantry. The goal is to own the things that inflation makes more expensive rather than holding the currency that is losing value. You want to be on the receiving end of the price hike, not the paying end. The third pillar is the sovereign firewall. This is the most controversial, but perhaps the most important. You must have a portion of your wealth that exists outside of the traditional banking system. We talked about the bail-ins and the freezing of accounts. If 100% of your net worth is sitting in a digital database controlled by a bank that is insolvent, you do not own your money. You are an unsecured creditor. This is where assets like Bitcoin come into the conversation. Not crypto gambling coins. Bitcoin. The smart money views Bitcoin as a digital escape hatch. It is a bearer asset that you can hold in your head, that you can transport across borders, and that no government can dilute or confiscate without your key. Even if you hate it, even if you don't understand it, having 1% or 2% of your wealth in a censorship-resistant network is a cheap insurance policy against the banking system turning off the lights. It is the digital equivalent of burying gold in the backyard, but you can send it anywhere in the world in 10 minutes. But there is one thing more valuable than gold. One thing more valuable than farmland. One thing more valuable than Bitcoin. If the credit markets freeze in 2027 and the supply chains fracture, the most valuable asset you can possess is a trusted network. Who can you call at 2 a.m.? Who are your neighbors? Do you have skills that are useful in a low-trust environment? When the financial abstraction is stripped away, society reverts to relationships. The lone wolf dies, the pack survives. The people who will lose everything are the isolated individuals who think their bank balance defines their worth. The people who will thrive are the ones who build strong communities, who learn practical skills, and who are producers, not just consumers. You have a choice to make today. You can continue to live in the normalcy bias. You can pretend that the debt doesn't matter, that the Japanese carry trade is just technical jargon, and that the government loves you. You can stay in the kill zone with the other 60 million people, or you can take control. You can look at your portfolio and ask, how much of this relies on the system working perfectly? You can start to deleverage. You can pay off your debts so you aren't a slave to the interest rates. You can buy your insurance assets. You can build your network. The year 2027 is coming. The mathematics are set in stone. The fuse in Tokyo has been lit. The system is not going to save you. It is designed to consume you to save itself. But you don't have to be a victim. You can be the captain of your own ship. The storm is inevitable, but drowning is optional. Position yourself now. The window is closing. And when the history books are written about the great reset of the 2020s, make sure your name is on the list of those who saw it coming and prepared, not the list of those who lost everything. Wake up. The time is now. End of script. Now we arrive at the end game, the liquidation, the moment the keys are handed over. People often ask, why haven't China or Russia saved Cuba? They did it in the Cold War. Why not now? Because of the legal wall. China likes to buy infrastructure. They are building the Belt and Road Initiative all over the world. They would love a deepwater port 90 miles from Florida, the Port of Mariel. But the Port of Mariel sits on land that is subject to a certified claim by a U.S. family. Under Title 30, if a Chinese state company buys that port, they can be sued in U.S. court. Their assets in New York or Los Angeles can be seized to pay the judgment. The U.S. has ring-fenced the island. They have made the assets toxic to any rival power. China will sell Cuba toaster ovens on credit, but they will not invest billions in fixed infrastructure because the title is dirty. So, how does this end? The grid collapses permanently. The protests become uncontrollable. The government fractures or flees. The U.S. will not invade with Marines. They will invade with humanitarian aid. They will offer to send the power barges back. They will offer to send food shipments. But the condition will be the acceptance of a transition council, a receivership government run by technocrats. And then comes the bill. The new government will need to re-enter the global economy. They will need to join the IMF and the World Bank to get loans to rebuild. But U.S. law, specifically the Helms-Burton Act, says the U.S. must vote against Cuba joining these institutions until the property claims are settled. This is the $100 billion number. Certified claims from 1960, 10 by with interest. Uncertified claims from Cuban Americans, estimated 40B plus. Syndicated debt to the Paris Club, 10B plus. Debts to Russia and China. Judgments from Title III lawsuits, billions more. The new government will be broke. They cannot pay $100 billion in cash. So the creditors will offer a deal, debt for equity. You can't pay us the $500 million judgment for the port terminal? Fine, give us the port. You can't pay us for the electric company? Fine, give us the utility. You can't pay for the land under the hotel? Give us the hotel. It will be the greatest privatization sale in the history of the Caribbean. The entire island, its beaches, its mines, its airports, its farmland, will be transferred to holding companies to settle the lawsuits. The Cuban people will be told they are now free. And they will be free to work as service staff in hotels that are owned by the grandchildren of the people who owned them in 1958. The tragedy of Cuba is not that the revolution failed. It is that the counter-revolution was financed with compound interest. The U.S. proved that you don't need to invade an island to conquer it. You just need to control the banking system, wait 60 years, and let the lawyers do the rest. The $100 billion lien is the chain that binds the island. The revolution died not when Fidel Castro died, but when the first Title III lawsuit was won in a Miami court. The lights will come back on in Havana soon, but the electricity bill will be paid directly to Wall Street. I'm James, and this is The Hidden Balance. Subscribe now to stay ahead of the curve, because when the history books are written, you'll want to be among the few who saw the foreclosure coming. Don't forget to subscribe. Join those who see what others ignore.